Buongiorno, buon pomeriggio, e buonasera, Lazio world. Welcome to our instant reaction pod. Consider this your stoppage time as we review the Derby della Capitale, which just wrapped up with Roma taking a 1-0 victory. It's been over 2 years since Roma has won this fixture, and we're starting to get used to the dominance in this matchup. But here we are today on the wrong side of things. Tell you what, Caleb, winning derbies with Sarri is a lot better than not winning them. So for all of those folks that were quick to demand Sarri's exit, well, here we are today, and we've got a lot to talk about. So I am Sean McIntosh, your host, joined by my co-host Caleb Adams. Caleb, how you feeling post-derby? Because I've got a lot of feelings, and I'm ready to unleash them. And I don't even care. Usually try to be level-headed, but this one has me as fiery as we saw our players on the pitch. So how you doing?
I'm wearing a black hoodie because it's depressing. Yeah. It sucks because even if we were struggling in league play, even if we had lost a game, we knew, at least under Sarri, that these. And to be fair, I do want to say this real quick. I do think De Rossi deserves some credit because it's also a new coach on Roma side as well. It's not like we lost to a Jose Mourinho side, which would have been even more infuriating. But no, it was. I forgot how this felt like. So to lose,
it sucks. So let's. For those of you that were fortunate enough to miss this match, and look, it was it was everything that you expect from a derby capitale, della capitale at least. There's a lot of derbies and rivalries around the world that people want to claim are tremendous, incredible, awesome. I'm sorry, but the Premier League doesn't have anything like this. There's a reason why when you talk about the top derbies in the world, anybody with half a brain always has this one as a top 3 fixture, and it is a fiery one and a cagey affair, and you don't need all the goals and glitz and glamour for this one to be felt. And if you're a neutral and you're watching it, look, there's no better shithousery that happens than in this matchup, and we saw that today. So we'll do our quick review of this one and on what happened on the pitch, starting off with the starting 11 that I had loads and loads of questions about. Many of us saw a potentially leaked lineup, a predicted lineup yesterday that I happen to love, and what we actually saw was quite different to that. Instead, we saw the insertion of Vecino over what many of us thought would be a Cataldi who, again, a Laziale through and through, always comes up in big games, particularly in the Rome Derby. We saw Casale over Patrick, and I wanted to see the likes of Kamada and Luis Alberto on the pitch at the same time to give us that just playmaking ability that we have just simply missed all season. Instead, we've got the pairing of Kamada and Isaacson. And what I'll say to Tudor's credit is most of those decisions seem to work out pretty well. So we start the game and again, cagey affair, but that feistiness really doesn't kick in until the second half. Early on, again, a brilliant high press by Gila, who wins a ball off Cristante. You see a decent combination play with Isaacson to Cheeto, and Cheeto with probably the only chance of the game, if we're being honest, comes in the first 10 minutes. And Cheeto tries to go near post and simply goes wide. We've got some dangerous opportunities, some worrisome opportunities. Casale attempts to clear a ball in the box in the 10th minute, goes behind him. Could have been an own goal. We're lucky that it simply goes out of bounds. We concede a corner. A huge Pellegrini strike in the 23rd minute from distance, where you see a shaky Mandas who parries it centrally. Fortunate that Romagnoli is there to clear. We see again, some moments where Mandas takes an extra touch in the 36th minute with a Lukaku approaching, forcing him to kick the ball out of bounds. And then we see an unfortunate moment, similarly to what we saw with Casale, but this time it's our wonder boy Gila in the 42nd minute. There's a whip ball that comes into the box. Gila with a poor clearance goes behind him. Lucky that it doesn't turn into anything any more dangerous than conceding a corner. However, it was that corner that ultimately punished us with a ball coming in from that corner and then relatively unmarked Mancini. It just had to be that SOB. Heads it in to give Roma a 1-0 lead going into At halftime, this is where we see the changes that were particularly head-scratching for me, but we'll get into that. Halftime subs: Tati for Ciro Immobile, Patrick for Romagnoli, and Pedro for Isaacson. And then we see a lot of back and forth. We see Lazio starting to get into the match a little bit more. Kamada scores a goal in the 63rd minute, which is very clearly ruled offside. A couple poor free kicks. 70th minute, we see Luis Alberto finally enter the match for Vecino. And then we see a chance for Luis Alberto. Tati finds Luis in the box, can't really get on the end of it. We then see a couple big crunching tackles by Gila, 92nd minute, a goal-saving tackle by Gila on Tammy Abraham. And then the match finishes with two really wasted free kick set-piece opportunities. And taking a look at the statistics in this one, you've got, interestingly enough, an expected goal count of 0.5 for Lazio and only 0.47. Ball possession, 54% possession for Lazio to Roma's 46. Roma ahead in total shots, 15 to Lazio's 11. 3 shots on target for Roma, continuing our really dismal performance when it comes to creating anything. We only managed to land 1 shot on target. No big chances in this one for us. And again, we find ourselves at the other side of a defeat, which now sees us at 7 in the table with 46 points. Roma now pull away firmly in that 5th spot with 55. They have played a couple more matches than Atalanta, who they are ahead of by 5 points. But I will say that essentially eliminates our Champions League hopes, ever so slim as they were, and really puts a dent in any sort of European hopes and dreams that we may or may not have had. So, Caleb, what are your 3 words then to describe this match?
I'm going to say can't blame Sadi. And why am I saying that? Because we saw a very signature performance for this season for us, which was conceding a soft goal and struggling to create anything in the final third. Same thing. We just can't blame Sadi for it. And even with Tudor, I think that there needs to be serious questions asked of the personnel. I think there need serious questions asked of the quality of the team, and I think that was on display today. And so those are my 3 words.
Yeah, I mean, look, and I'll say I agree. And this goes towards all the Saudi haters, and you know, we always questioned, and as I will today, question Tudor, right? A manager always has a part to play, but we talked about it. Like the players didn't change, and the mentality's still there, and the woes are still there, and particularly in that final third and lapses in particular moments. But for anybody that thought we were just going to get rid of Sadi and things were magically going to change, or that he was the reason, you know, all of these players were being held back without really examining the full picture. And I'm sure, right, people are going to run and hide, and they always have their agenda. They want to like, you know, defend Tudor or you know, crap on Sadi. But look, my 3 words are Tudor decisions cost. I thought, again, while we'll talk about some of the players, I did have questions. I thought some of those decisions were head scratching. And, I started off by saying, look, I was kind of questioning some of the starting 11. And I really, when I saw the potential lineup with Kamada and Luis, my eyes lit up. I wanted to see both of those guys. We haven't seen those two in a starting 11 since the Napoli match to start our campaign, which was, again, the best match we played all season. And there was a brilliance between both of those two that we haven't had a chance to see. So I was really excited. I thought it was a statement. We were going to come out and play on the front foot. And instead, we got Vecino, we got Isaacson. And guess what? Vecino and Isaacson, particularly in that first half, linked up incredibly well. And they happen to be two of our better players. And so not of the continuing theme of us doing a lot of the things well up until the final third was still present, which led to very few opportunities. And talk about Ciro Immobile, like he only had one chance. And granted, right, I think he took the right approach. I think had he, right, you probably think he should go far post in that moment. It looked like there was some defenders there that wouldn't have allowed for that. So he tries to go near post. Right, that's a tough shot. We want him to get it on frame, but he simply misses. But I actually felt good. Like, okay, but you know what? Cheeto, if we keep creating these opportunities, he's going to bag one. I feel confident because I saw something there. And then he doesn't get another opportunity. We sub him off at halftime. And for me, that is one I struggle with. It's the Rome derby. And he is our king. And you sub him off, the player that's going to have maybe the most passion, and not even giving him another opportunity to find his way into this, when, again, I didn't think he played a particularly poor half. He had one opportunity, and that was that. And then to see the likes of Isaacson pulled, who I thought, again, had a pretty strong first half. So to not give them that chance to continue on, for me, was a bit baffling. Caleb, how did you feel about those halftime substitutions?
Yeah, this is the part I think where we talked before. I disagree on one aspect. I do think regardless, I do find it strange making changes like that immediately at the half to begin with. However, did we not look better in the second half? Were we not much more protected in the second half?
I mean, did we I don't think we created anything. I still think the best opportunity that we created all match was still in the first half when Ciro Immobile was there. So it was still a lot of the same, like, oh, okay, like we were on the ball, but in that second half, Roma all lead. So they were less inclined to pressure. I find it really hard to take those players off at half.
I think it's tough regardless. It is strange. However, if that had happened and we were like more the same, I would have been I would have been maybe like livid. However, I will say this. First of all, Roma was much more open in that first half. It was much more transitional game. Isaacson, all these guys had much more room to operate. Once they got the goal, they locked in and they were there for, okay, we're going to stay here for the rest of the game. And even then I did feel like we were quite good in the second half. I felt much more comfortable in the first half. I thought it was anyone's game. The second half, I felt much more comfortable. I also want to say, like, if you look at, I know it snaps on everything, but Cheeto, you said was like mid, but I thought he was like kind of bad. I'm not going to lie. I thought he was pretty poor in some aspects. I think the team as a whole didn't help him. Classic. But I thought most of the success that we had that first half did come from Vecino and Isaacson. So for me, Immobile, it wasn't what I was upset about. It was Isaacson coming off. For Pedro, if we're subbing in somebody like Sakani,
that's the same thing with Cheeto. Again, if you're subbing him off for a guy that's been scoring goals, but Tati runs with his head cut off, and so now at least that trifecta was showing something. Let those guys get a 10-minute run into the second half with Isaacson and Vecino and Cheeto. Instead, we changed two of the three. And I felt like we started this second half a little bit disjointed before, we started getting into it. I just would have liked, throw those guys out for another 10, 15 minutes. And if it continues, great, make the substitutions.
No, that I totally agree with you. I don't think you need to be making those changes right to have, regardless. I would have loved to see those changes a little later if that happened, but I still think that, look, if Immobile is not getting chances, he's not really providing anything else. That's the reality. Immobile this season.
I mean, I still think we're like that space that comes for Vecino and Isaacson, like that happens because Cheeto is there.
Yeah, but that team makes the same runs. That team makes the same sort of effort. Like if it's like, Immobile puts in effort, like yeah, he does.
It's not the effort though. It's where he knows the movements to make, and he's pulling defenders away. I think that Tati gives an effort, but he's not always making the smart runs to pull a defender. Like I just don't think he has that yet.
Real quick, let me just finish this point real quick. That can be the case. I do think in terms of like running off the shoulder, Immobile is a little better. But when Roma, my thinking of why Tudor put in Tati, because I don't think it's like all right, Cheeto, that's enough of that. Let's see what the other guys are on. I don't think it's much of an audition. I actually think that Tudor saw, okay, Roma are just parking it now. And Tati is a guy who tends to drop back, is better in those tight spaces. And I think it's a little more useful in trying to break down a low block than someone like Cheeto. If the game was more like the first half and it was 0-0, I think Cheeto is better suited for that. Like I thought Cheeto, I think if the game was 0-0 at the half, if Roma was still trying to go for goals in the second half, I think Cheeto could have maybe bagged one or two. But I do think part of the reasoning behind that choice wasn't as sinister as maybe some fans make it out to be. I do think that Tudor's like, okay, Roma are clearly going to start parking here. They're letting us have the ball. We need someone who's a little better in tight spaces, who's going to drop back, combine quicker. And like, I don't think it's deniable that he's just better at that than Cheeto. So I think that's why I'm not so pissed about it. Even though still, regardless, Cheeto shouldn't have come off of the half. Regardless.
Yeah. I mean, let's just leave it at that. I mean, again, we can agree that halftime substitution, it says a lot. And even if you don't mean it to say something, it says a lot. And that's just not the way, I just don't think that's the way that you treat Cheeto Immobile in this type of a match, particularly when the player that you're bringing on just hasn't, right? It's not like this player is putting any sort of pressure on Cheeto. So, that's my issue with it. Let's talk about some of these players, right? Who do you have as your? Let's start with man of the match. Who do you have as your man of the match? Because I think I had three players that I thought stood out amongst the rest. So who do you have?
Funny enough, it was the player you mentioned earlier. The funny player that I was like, I don't know about that, and that was Vecino. I actually thought Vecino had a really good game. Really, a lot of the attacks that came and those combinations that produced half opportunities, most of those came from Vecino. I thought Vecino outshined Guendouzi today, which is a big deal. If you look at his stats, just run through the stats real quick. 88% passing accuracy. He created the highest XG of any player on the team. He created 0.24 expected goals. So he actually was the most, not only was he good in possession and build up facilitating, he was actually helping create chances, which makes the decision to drop him. Which makes the decision to break up that sort of flow that was going with him a little more mind-boggling. He also had 5 out of 5 successful dribbles, about half of his long balls hit, 2 of 4, and he won 86% of his duels, 6 of 7. So I thought he had a really complete game, and shout out to him. I thought he was awful last game. I thought he was awful against Juventus, and so I was really questioning that coming in. But hey, he had a really good game. It's unfortunate that teammates and the team as a whole couldn't also emulate that sort of energy. And another thing too, he had a lot of heart this game. He knew what it means.
Yeah, I agree. I had him as one of my potential players. Again, to your point, I thought he was dreadful in the Coppa Italia match against Juventus, which is why I was particularly upset to see him then getting inserted into the lineup, which meant not seeing Cataldi, but he proved me wrong. He came in and he played extremely well. He, was one of our brighter players in attack. And he combined really well with Isaacson, and I thought he did a lot. The other two players that have been the other two players that are probably our biggest standouts of the season. I thought Guendouzi, played really well, doing the things that he always does. Right, he's everywhere at all times. He's in the middle of all of the nonsense. I thought he also did really well to not find himself on the other end of a second yellow or a red card. And then, I'm going to give the man of the match to Vecino, and simply because my third player, Mario Gila, who, again, just licensed to make these just incredible runs. Honestly, he makes better runs with the ball at his feet than probably any of our attacking players at this point.
Tell me about it. I don't want to notice that. I'm like, is he our best attacker right now?
He might be. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I went ahead and the other day actually scooped up an autographed rookie card of
Nice.
Mario Gila before he went on to become the best center back in the world. And but he's just so incredible. Obviously, some goal saving tackles at the end of the match was always in the right position, and when he wasn't, he's got the pace to recover. The only reason I'm not going to give it to him is, unfortunately, it was his, error. It was his poor clearance attempt that led to the corner that obviously punished us. So for that, I've got to give it to Vecino. Again, also a surprise because I was a bit disappointed to see him in the starting 11. But, shifting to our bidone, I don't know. This might come as a surprise. It's perfect because we're getting the questions about this player on YouTube. We've got folks asking, what do we think about
new signing? Kamafa? New signing in?
Hey, come on. So I actually had Kamada as my bidone. And
really?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And I will say that about 75% of the match, I was convinced that he was my bidone. And then probably the last 10, 15 minutes, I thought he started to come to life a little bit. So I will give him that credit. The other player that I'd throw in there was Felipe Anderson. I thought Felipe Anderson was largely invisible, didn't really hurt us. I don't think that there's a player that particularly stood out as a bidone. Right. Like Romagnoli was probably most to blame on that goal. But again, he only got a half, and God knows why. Again, that's one that I'm scratching my head about. I'm assuming, and the reason why I didn't spend a ton of time talking about it is that it was injury related, because if it was for any other reason but injury, Tudor, what the hell are you doing? Right. So, but here's why I say Kamada, and here's what I'm starting to sense as an issue for him. And I did see it better from him once Luis Alberto came into the match. I thought he played a lot better, which goes to my early point. I'd love to see both of them on the pitch. I just thought is that I just don't know if he's got I don't want to knock him. It's not a desire. I'm sure he wants to win, right? It's just the way he presents himself a little bit. He did have a big tackle at the end of the match, which was quite surprising, that he had this big tackle to win the ball back. But I just feel like he doesn't have a passion, right? I feel like he is sometimes a little bit too slow. There was a moment, a really good example of a ball being played by Vecino to start an attack, and Kamada was on the other end of it, and it's a quick turnover. I don't ever see him beating a man one-on-one. So when I look at the relatively invisible performance by Felipe Anderson, he still had right?
Mm.
He still won 2 out of his 3 tackles. He still was perfect in his dribbles. Like I think he was like 2 for 2 in successful dribbles, right? When you look at Kamada, like they're just like he's 0 for 2 in successful dribbles. Doesn't take a lot more than that. I do think he was better served when he was in a little bit more like center midfield position or drop back.
Mm-hmm.
But in that case, I still prefer a Cataldi or when Rovella is back. So I don't know. Am I off? Because I just really didn't feel like until it was the end of the match, he just his body language, like the desire, the even in right the goal, he's offside in that, and he's just a little bit too slow to recognize it. Even in the 94th minute, there's a wasted set piece, and Pellegrini. I thought actually, to Tudor's credit, I thought it was a pretty well drawn up set
It
piece.
was,
Right?
yeah.
Felipe has it, taps it off to Pellegrini. Pellegrini passes the ball into the box. It's a threaded ball, maybe a tad bit too much pace, but you know what? Kamada just had no idea. Like Kamada wasn't even looking for it. So I don't know. There was just these moments that I thought Kamada would have been best served to have a Luis Alberto in there instead of a Kamada, because even Luis, like, you're going to have a little bit more dictation from how he wants everybody else to play. There's a little bit more command. I just don't see that from Kamada at this point.
No, that's fair. I mean, in terms of like Kamada, I don't think is your like headliner. I think he's much better suited if he's kind of playing that second, third fiddle guy to a more prevalent attacking figure in the team. The problem is we don't really have that in this team right now. And I actually think Kamada showed more heart today than I've seen in a while. Like before, he wouldn't even bother like running over and marking his man if they ran by him. Today he was putting in crunching tackles. He was that I guess that the energy of the Derby de la Capitale was like infused in him, because I actually felt that he showed more heart today than in any previous game. But I understand where you're coming from.
Well, that's for sure. Like that's for sure. But like
the ball was low.
It took, again, it took a while to that point where I was like, oh wow, a crunching tackle from Kamada. Like, okay. But it's hard not to be any more passionate than what he has been.
But like I think I do think that's fair, because I also has my issues with Kamada is he's gotten into good positions where he can put in a cross, and he's been unfortunate that some of those no one's there or it gets blocked. But also where it gets me is he definitely he struggles to beat Italian defenders, because he gets in these moments, and credit to him, he does try and take players on. He does. But he was snuffed out today every single time he tried. And it was and I got frustrated, because I was like, oh my goodness, like if you're gonna try and beat your man there, you've got to make it past him, or you at least can't lose possession, because you're gonna kill his chance, and he did. So I don't hate Kamada being your Bidone. I don't hate that decision at all. I went with Felipe because whereas you at least noticed Kamada today. You at least noticed Kamada today. And I do think he has some good, and I think he has some bad. I thought Felipe today was like woeful across the board. Like, he had some good little dribbles, but those dribbles that he did weren't like attacking in the final third ones. They were just like, let me get past the winger that's pressing me. So like, you have to like put a little context in there. And I thought that there was some attacking opportunities where he just made some decisions where I was like, what is he doing? Or he lost the ball here and there where it was just dangerous. And some of those transition opportunities for Roma came from. But like you said, I don't really think anyone was like woeful today. Even Casale, I thought Casale was solid enough. He didn't make any mistakes. Like, he was pretty solid. But yeah, I think Kamada and Felipe would be like those two candidates. For sure.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, those are the two that I had, because I didn't, everybody else kind of was fine. And it's just comes down to the unit just not being able to have a final product at the end of the day. And they've got to figure that out quickly. And this is at this point, right? This is what the rest of these matches are going to be for. Like, figuring it out. Now, I really, yeah, I just let's talk about these last few matches and what we're going to be using the rest of the season for. We have a pretty soft schedule going down the stretch. Right? Our next couple matches now, we've got Salernitana, we've got Genoa before we play the second leg of Coppa Italia against Juve. Then it's Verona, Monza, Empoli before you've got Inter, who at this point will surely have their Scudetto wrapped up, and we close out with Sassuolo. How are you approaching the rest of the season? What's the primary focus if you're Tudor going into these games?
If I'm Tudor, I'm seeing the rest of the season as an audition. Okay, guys, you will all get your fair chances to play. You will have a shot to prove that you deserve a spot on this team going forward. I think that players like Chiro, like Alberto, like Felipe, Vecino, I think all these guys right now are either, hopefully at least Chiro sticks around, but these guys are playing for either staying at the team or getting a better move or getting a decent move, right? So even if they're not going to stay, you're still playing for your next job, right? So for me, it's just an audition for Igor. What do we have in the squad? Who fits it? Who doesn't? Who's extra? Because you said, if we do play the system in Kamada, because I like Kamada a lot beside Guendouzi. I like those two a lot in midfield together. And I love them even more when Alberto's in front of them. I like that trio a lot. That's what in this particular system. However, you have someone like Rovella, young, arguably the most talented six coming out of Italy right now. There is some excess weight on the team, and it's a matter of, okay, what's the extra fat we're gonna cut off,
Yeah.
So that's how I'm looking at it, as like, let me see what this team has. Give Saxon some minutes. Give players that you do plan on having next year, give them some minutes so they can keep getting adjusted to the league and comfortable. And that's how I'm looking at. But in terms of like competitiveness, I'm kind of checked out. For me, like, we had to win this game in order to kind of get that stretch going. We can still climb up the table because these are relatively easier games. But for me, it's not really a priority.
Yeah, I think audition is interesting. I think yes, part of the focus should be I want us to, we've talked about there's going to be and should be an exodus of players, and we need to rejuvenate the squad in really key positions, but there's still core. And I want us to start using that core now so that they can start building confidence, particularly against these sides. So they get a run of matches that, we know that we oftentimes don't bring in transfers until very late into the off season, and they don't get enough time together. Like, we need to be using this as an off season and really focusing on some of these players that we do know have a future here, right? Gila has obviously now clear as day, even with Tudor, that he is a fixed player. We got to make sure we insert Isaacson. Once Rovella is healthy, he's got to be in there. And this is where, look, Kamada, I don't know, right? But Rovella needs to play.
Let me ask this.
Player. Go ahead.
Because I'm saying, sorry to interrupt. This goes to your point. What do you think? Because, like, what do you think about Cheeto? Like, first is what players do you think are not a part of next year's plans? Let's talk about that first.
Well, so
Kamada life because he's on a year contract.
Yeah, look, I think Kamada is out.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I think he should be, just based on look, in this system, I said it. I want Rovella in there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want Rovella, Guendouzi. Those are my future players. Cataldi still has a part to play. So I think starting with Kamada, I think he's a player that probably just doesn't fit any longer. I don't love him as that attacking midfielder. I think there's a big decision with Luis Alberto then. I am curious in Tudor's approach. I wonder, and I'm going to say this. Obviously, I don't know his intentions, no idea. But just based on some of the players that we see not necessarily getting time or being quick to be yanked, right? Luis Alberto isn't finding himself in the starting lineups under Tudor and finding himself coming into matches a little bit too late, for my personal liking. Ciro Immobile, quick to be yanked. Obviously, in Tudor's first match, it was Tati Castellanos. Is he trying to send a message, right? Is that I wonder if that's part of the approach. If so, I do not like that. It is not. I don't need a message sent. The message that's going to be sent comes in winning matches, getting people to buy into your system, doing what is right to ultimately produce on the pitch, not to come in and look. It should be a clean slate for everybody. But we saw and heard a lot of drama between, maybe a couple key players and Sarri and some of that, like, and Lotito coming out and saying some of that. That none of that needs to bleed over into Tudor and trying to send him that shouldn't happen. So, but Cheeto has to stay. Right? Cheeto, you need to be building him up. You need to be using him in these matches because Tati hasn't claimed it. He's had all the opportunity in the world. So I think he needs to be a part of this. Luis, I question, because Luis is always gonna, be Luis. And I think this is the summer to really make a decision on what we're going to do. But that has to come. If he's gone, that decision needs to be made right away, and it needs to come with some sort of a replacement. I don't think Kamada is it. Felipe Anderson, another player that a quick decision needs to be made. He's shown his value with Tudor already, obviously, has played a lot, but I think a decision needs to be made quickly. I think we need to move away from Marusic, and we need to find an improved younger player there. I think Hisai, right, time to move on. Interestingly enough, we haven't even seen Hisai as part of these lineups at all with Tudor. So I think those are some players right off the bat. I think Tati still belongs, right? It's only his first year. I think he still has a place on the squad. Vecino, probably time for him to go. Just he's a little bit older. Pedro, probably time to go. And we need to find that next Cheeto. But I think you've got to keep Cheeto here.
Let me ask you this then, following it up. So here on out, what do you want to see in the lineup? Assuming everyone's healthy, everyone's available.
Yep, assuming everybody is healthy, I want to see. I think Gila. I think you go Gila, Romagnoli. That's without question. That is our future. And then that third one, honestly, it's
gotta be Patrick. Come on now.
Probably, but I'm okay with rotating. That one I'm okay with because we have to then make a decision on Casale. And so these 5 matches are the opportunity to say, Casale, do you belong? Yes or no? Go ahead.
We're gonna need Casale anyway. We're running 3. We have a 3 center back.
I get it, and we need more center backs, but we have to determine whether or not he is right. So that means you have to play him. So there are matches that you play Patrick. There are matches that you play Casale. I tell you what, we're not going to be the club that we want to be if we're starting Patrick or Casale match in and match out. So I think you use those. You got to play those two because those are who we have, and then we've got to bring in another really quality center back. But I do think Casale at least deserves the rest of this season to see can he earn a spot. So that for me, and then I think Pellegrini needs to have more time. Right now, it's a new role, new manager. We've all talked about him probably being more suited for a wingback position. So let's see. I think he should be probably if you start him, that means
Right wing back.
right. Then you probably go Felipe Anderson as right wing back. But honestly,
Even if he may not be a part of next season's plans, like,
but then it's going to be Matosic, who I don't think is part of next season's plan either. So right, so that right wing back is two players that are probably, I would say Felipe because he has more of a chance than Matosic maybe, or at least I would want him over Matosic.
I wish Matosic would get. I wish Matosic was considered center back depth.
He could play center back, and he has
6 foot as a wide center back. I think you get him out of the wing back. He's not a wing back. He's
right,
more. He's closer to a center back than he is a wing back.
Yep, agreed. But again, is that right? That's kind of your desperate situation if we want to move forward as a club. Like, we just don't need. He should not be one of our center backs.
Yeah,
I think in midfield you go Guendouzi and Rovella because you've got to figure it out. You now have to use these matches to see, can Rovella play in that traditional box to box. Again, it doesn't even need to be a box to box. He can still be that midfielder that sits ahead of the center backs and be a little bit more of your deep lying. So I think those two, no question, game in and game out. And then it's probably like, can we get Luis back to firing on all cylinders? Because again, I don't know if that Kamada, particularly like on his wages and just not seeing enough from him. I tried to see if maybe Cheeto and Luis can reclaim some of that, and then Isaacson, like that's now it's Isaacson, and then obviously when Zaccagni is back, now you rotate and you see if Zaccagni can play in that role.
Okay, for me, I agree with most of it. I am there are some different things that I would do personally because I like Alberto is our second highest paid player on the team. He's getting paid according to Capology. He's getting paid He's getting paid the same as Cheeto supposedly. He's getting paid 7.4 million. Do we think 7.4 million is worth for a 32, 33, 34-year-old Alberto? For me, Alberto's already out the window. Like, he's already out the door, in my opinion. Personally, a player like him is nice, but it's a bit of a luxury at this point. So I would like to see personally, of course, Guendouzi, Rovella, and I would like to see a trio of Isaacson, Tati, and Cheeto. Because there have been a lot of fans, even people who are maybe anti-Tati and stuff, are like, can we put this man as an attacking midfielder instead? Because I think Tati provides more of that final ball, of that ability to quickly interplay than someone like Kamada. Right? And I'm really curious to see, like, when I think of Tati for me is a very similar profile to Griezmann. Griezmann's best years have come under another striker, right? Atletico Madrid right now, it's Morata and Griezmann. Griezmann just kind of floats around and feeds Morata, and Morata's striving, even though Morata's always been a very mid striker. But I would love to see what that trio can do, because that way we could see Tati and Isaacson get the minutes, also put less of responsibility on creating an interplay on Cheeto, so he can focus on positioning, finishing. And so I think Cheeto could benefit from that, and I think both Tati and Isaacson could get their minutes and benefit from that too. So that's personally what I would like to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sold. One of the things that we always profiled Tati when he was first signed was his flexibility. Has spent time as a winger, and we know he has the technical ability, and it's just finding himself in the right finishing position that he struggled, and that's where Cheeto thrives, and providing more support for Cheeto, particularly at this phase of Cheeto's career, because I do think Cheeto can extend his career as long as we can't have him as the lone striker in a 4-3-3. He just doesn't have the pace. Like, he needs the players around him. So I like it. Obviously, Tati and Isaacson both have the pace too, and are explosive players. And then, Zaccagni, I still think he has a place. But and that's what we need to use this last 5-6 matches to figure out. Because players like Zaccagni, for example, can fetch something on the market. Still a young player, still player that's national team. Luis Alberto is not going to fetch 20 plus million at this point, but could fetch something. He's still a very good player, so they've got to make these decisions, and then we've got to invest as soon as possible. But regardless of what happens, like we know who our young core are. That's what I focus on. Plus Cheeto. You've got to keep him in Rome, and there's still enough there. We're just not necessarily giving him the system, the support, and again, yanking him at halftime of a match isn't gonna help, right? It's gonna upset him. It's gonna then disrupt the locker room. I mean, he has been way too important of a player for this club to allow a couple months to just sully all of that. So important matches, while we may not think they are as it relates to our hopes and dreams of qualifying for Champions League, they are still really critical for the future and for us seeing how Tudor and these players can fix some of this. And, we'd still like to qualify for Europa at the very least. So, look, in our hearts, Rome is always blue, so it doesn't matter what the result is. At the end of the day, it is sempre forte.